welcome back. I decided I wanted to take a break between the rounds to go ahead and talk to y'all about some more awesome D&D stuff. Namely, I wanted to talk about the 6 races that I mentioned in my last video that were in the Unearthed Arcana Travelers of the Multiverse that I have a sinking suspicion are going to be in the Spelljammer setting books. Let's dive into this, guys. So, the first race we were going to talk about today is the Astral Elf. Oh, go figure, you know, there's an elf for every setting. Pretty soon we're going to have a Keebler elf, we're probably going to have a North Pole elf, maybe a South Pole elf at one of these points. Just an elf for every setting. But at least it's fitting for this one. So, the whole idea is that these elves ventured from the Feywild into the astral plane a long time ago in order to get closer to their gods. And it definitely affected how they looked at the world because the silvery timeless void of the astral plane changed them. So they're a lot more mystical, they see time and memory a bit different than most elves, and honestly, they're old and timeless to the point that creeps out other elves. So, just to get into how that sort of stuff is represented by their abilities, scores, and their stats, they are humanoid creatures of medium size, and they can walk 30 feet. They have the Astral Fire feature, which means they know either Dancing Light or Sacred Flame at level 1, and they can choose for Intelligence, Charisma, or Wisdom to be their casting modifier for that spell. They also have Dark Vision out to 60 feet, which is natural for elves. They have Fey Ancestry and Keen Senses, which are also both just natural things for elves. Proficiency on perception checks and advantages against being charmed. They have the Radiant Soul feature, which means when they succeed on a death save, they can regain a number of hit points equal to their proficiency modifier, plus their choice of Intelligence, Charisma, or Wisdom, and they make the choice when they create the character. And they can't use that again until after they have a long rest. They also can go into a trance like all other elves, so instead of taking a normal long rest, they can just sit around and meditate for 4 hours, and they can get the benefits of a long rest. They also get a bit of a more interesting trance than other elves because of trance proficiencies. Whenever they finish a long rest using their trance trait, they gain 2 proficiencies, each one with a weapon or a tool of their choice, and they mystically pull these out of the ether from all the memories of their ancestors and stuff like that. And they retain these until they finish their long rest. So, I think this is all right as far as playtest material goes. I think they've nailed the mystical element of the Astral Elves pretty well with the free cantrip and the fact that they can choose what casting modifier they want to use for it, and the fact that they get 1 free get up a day at least is also really nice. The Radiant Soul isn't exactly as potent as the Relentless Endurance that you see on a half-orc, but I think that's okay. Being able to just essentially roll a natural 20 on a death save and get back up with a little bit of extra help is pretty awesome. And then we move on to the Autognome. So the Autognome is a small construct that was created in the likeness of rock gnomes, and they are constructs that are honestly super cool. They're hyper built and specialized for certain purposes, and they're pretty darn resilient as we're about to get into. So first off, their creature type is Construct. They are small, they have a walking speed of 30 feet, they have armored casing, which means their armor class without armor is 13 plus their dex modifier. They are built for success, which means they can add a d4 to 1 attack roll, ability check, or saving throw they make, and they can do so after seeing the d20 result, but before the result is determined and adjudicated. And you can use this a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. They also have Mechanical Nature, which means they don't need to eat, sleep, drink, or breathe. They have advantage against being paralyzed or poisoned, and they have immunity to disease and resistance to poison damage. They also have Sentry's Rest, which just goes right up there with Mechanical Nature for constructs. It's the whole construct kit and caboodle here. Sentry's Rest allows them to spend at least 6 hours in an active motionless state, but still conscious, so they can stand watch for 6 hours as their long rest cycle. They also have Specialized Design, which means they gain 2 tool proficiencies of their choice. And the big ribbon ability for the auto gnome is True Life. So True Life allows them to be healed with the Mending cantrip. So when Mending is used on an auto gnome, they can expend a hit die and roll it, and add that many hit points plus their Constitution modifier. Also, they were built for healing spells like Cure Wounds and Healing Word to work on them. Huh. So I'm just gonna say it, guys. The auto gnome's a bit of a machine. Like, it's really darn good. It has the unedited armored casing of the Warforged with 13 plus dex, which I could honestly see them lowering down to 11 in dex and this be reasonable. Built for success as many times as their proficiency bonus a day, which just stacks on a d4 on top of a bless and on top of a guidance. You could get some really high numbers for your checks at early levels. And they also get 2 proficiencies and tools of their choice, so you can be highly specialized in any form of labor, whether it be masonry, smithing, and since this is an astrological setting, I can see cartographer's tools or astronomer's tools being useful on these guys. And I kind of like the idea of seeing it built into their mainframe, so like their eyes have like oculi and stuff like that that sort of focus on stargazing, that type of cool stuff. And the ability for them to essentially get a minute-long short rest by casting the Mending spell on them, I don't think that's a big deal. I mean, they're still expending the hit die, and someone still has to be able to have the Mending cantrip and a minute to cast it on them. So there are still some expenditure of resources happening here, and I think it's a nice little feature that the machine can have a quick patch. And that's all on the auto gnome, so let's go to the GIF, or GIF as it's actually said, that they debate on how to pronounce their race's name, and it usually ends up with them getting into headbutting matches. So as you can see, the race is rather rowdy and they like to get into rumbles a lot. So to get into the actual statistics of the GIF, these 7-foot tall hippo men, they are humanoids, they are medium sized, they have a walking speed and a swimming speed of 30 feet, and they have 2 traits. They have damage dealer. So whenever they roll a 1 on a damage die for a melee attack, they can re-roll the die and use the new roll, and they can only do that once a turn. They also have Hippo build, which gives them advantage on strength-based ability checks and strength saving throws. In addition, they count as 1 size larger when determining their carrying capacity and the weight you can push, drag, or lift. Alright, so if they're going to put this into the Spelljammer book, this needs some work. They essentially just have powerful build plus and the ability, like, once a turn to re-roll a 1 on a melee damage attack. So you have to roll badly, and it has to be on a melee attack roll, which I gotta say, that's kind of bupkis considering the GIF are well known for their ability of using gunpowder, literally throwing gunpowder kegs at their enemies or shooting them with pistols or blunderbusses. I would have at least liked for them to have gotten training or proficiency in firearms, because that at least feels fitting for the race. Now I get, since this is UA and playtest material that's not exclusive to a certain setting, they couldn't throw firearms in there because they don't know what your homebrew campaign looks like. I'm just hoping for the Spelljammer setting that the GIF get a little bit of love, because right now, I think they're probably going to sink to the bottom of my choices for something I'd want to play in Spelljammer. And then you have the Hidozi. The Hidozi are a people that are similar to monkeys, and they have membranous flaps of skin underneath their arms that can be used for paragliding. These creatures, I think, are pretty darn interesting, and their traits leave a lot to... you can do a lot with them based off their traits. So first off, they're humanoids. They can be either medium or small. You get to choose the size when you create the character. They have a walking and a climbing speed of 30 feet. They have dexterous feet, which means they can take the use an object action as a bonus action, which is an ability straight out of the Thief subclass for Rogue. And if they are not incapacitated or wearing heavy armor, they can extend their skin membranes and glide. So how that works is, when they fall, they can move up to 5 feet horizontally for every 1 foot that they descend. And they also have the ability to use their reaction to take no damage if they would take fall damage. So the Hidozi already seem very interesting to me. There's a lot of monkey business afoot here with this race. There's a lot of rogue chicanery you can get up to with a climbing speed and the ability to glide and use an object as a bonus action. That's just really good for your rogue types. Your first off, your rogues, your rangers. There's just a lot of options left open for exploration with the Hidozi, and I'm really glad that they brought the Hidozi in, because the Hidozi are actually based off of the Yarizan, which are a simian-like people from Star Frontiers. Star Frontiers is a sci-fi RPG that TSR did back in the 80s, so it's nice to see them using some of their old property in a D&D setting. Speaking of using some of their old IP in a D&D setting, we have the Plasmoids, which are based off the Drazalites from the Star Frontier setting. So, they are ooze people. They're jelly folk. And I'm really excited to see what they can do with these, because they look pretty potent. First off, their creature type is ooze. So again, spells that would affect humanoids or like charm person, dominate person isn't going to work on them. That and the auto gnome definitely have a distinct advantage. Their walking speed is 30 feet. They are amorphous, which means they can squeeze through a space as narrow as 1 inch, provided they are wearing and carrying nothing, and they also have advantage on ability checks to start or escape from a grapple. So this could be an interesting unconventional grappler build if you really want to make it that way. They also have dark vision up to 60 feet. They can hold their breath for an hour. They have resistance to acid and poison damage, and they have advantage on saving throws against being poisoned. And their last ability is Shape Self. So if they're not incapacitated, they can reshape their body to give themselves a head, 1 or 2 arms, 1 or 2 legs, and makeshift hands or feet. And they can also, for no action, revert back to their natural puddle self. And as a bonus action, they can extrude a pseudopod that is about 6 inches wide and 10 feet long, or they can reabsorb that into their body for the same bonus action. They can use this pseudopod to manipulate an object, open an unlocked door or container, stow or retrieve an item from an open container, or pour out the contents of a container. This pseudopod cannot attack or activate magic items or carry more than 10 pounds. So I'm really excited about the Plasmoids, because they remind me a lot of the Founders and Odo from Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and I love me some Odo. He was like probably one of my favorite characters on that show. There's a lot of infiltration possibilities here with the ability to hold your breath for an hour while also squeezing in to any area as narrow as 1 inch, and having the ability to just start off resistant to both acid and poison damage and advantage on throws against being poisoned is pretty potent. I mean, acid and poison damage are kind of uncommon, so you're not going to see it all that often. But that's 2 damage resistances at level 1. That's pretty good. And then Shape Self to go ahead and alter your form from a puddle to any sort of humanoid shape that you want to. You can really flubber it up here. I could see people saying that this is overpowered and it needs to be nerfed a little bit, but quite honestly, I'm not too sure about that. It's got a lot of nice survivability and exploration options, but quite honestly, it's only going to really be told if it's overpowered by testing it out and playing it. And then we get the Thri-Crane, last but most certainly not least. These are 6-foot-tall bipedal bug people that have 4 arms and telepathy. So to get into them, they can't speak normally. They speak the way that actual like ants would speak, by clicking their mandibles and using their antennae and body language, but their telepathy sort of makes up for that when communicating with other races. But let's get into sort of what this race is about. So as far as creature type goes, Thri-Crane are considered monstrosities, so again, humanoid spells aren't going to work against them. They can be medium or small, and you get to choose that when you select the race. Their walking speed is 30 feet. They have the chameleon carapace, which means when they're not wearing armor, their AC is 13 plus their dex modifier, but also, as an action, they can change the texture and color of their carapace to blend in with their surroundings. So they get advantage on dexterity checks to hide in their surroundings. So they essentially have like Klingon cloaking devices put into their carapace. That's really dope, actually. I'm a big fan of that. They have dark vision out to 60 feet, and they have secondary arms, which means they have a set of 2 slightly smaller arms that can function just like their primary arms with 2 exceptions. For one, they cannot use a shield with their secondary arms, and they cannot use a weapon unless this weapon has the light property. So you can already get very creative with that. As written, I'm interpreting that you can have a Thri-Kreen with a sword and a shield, but he can use his secondary arms to cast spells that require somatic components. Or they can climb a ladder, or they can work with an interface or a console while having both their hands full with weapons or defenses. So I can already see that people abusing that, so that might be something that gets actually a little bit edited if the Thri-Kreen are going to end up in the Spelljammer setting, but right now I think that's pretty potent. Also, they have sleepless revitalization, so they don't require sleep, and they can choose for their long rest to just remain inert for 6 hours and stay awake, similar to Sentry's Rest. So we get another race that doesn't need to sleep. I think that's kind of cool. They also have Thri-Kreen telepathy, so they have the magical ability to communicate mentally with any number of willing creatures within 120 feet of them that they can see. So that can be broken if either the Thri-Kreen or the recipient is rendered unconscious or incapacitated. You end up more than 120 feet apart, or you decide to mentally break the contact with no action required on either party's part. So I think that's pretty cool. It's like the poor man's version of Rari's telepathic bond, and I think it's an interesting way to just go ahead and get some secret communication with the rest of your party members as this freaky deaky bug man who normally can't be understood because he's too busy clickety-clacking his pincers and swinging his antennae around. So that's actually all the races I wanted to talk about for the Travelers of the Multiverse today. I'd love to hear what you guys think about these races in the comments, what you guys think are overpowered, or what's going to need a bit of love, or what's going to need to be nerfed a little bit. But until next time, stay classy, stay sassy, and stay caffeinated. I'll catch you later.